It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hi, my name is Rob, and I'm here for a State of the Dungeon address for the game that took place on September 22nd, the year 2022. The game, 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons on the Dragon Heist story path, somewhat altered, but yeah, mostly. The group was regrouping to try to make some positive progress in all of the various irons they have in the fire. The first thing that they wanted to get done by mutual agreement, after doing a little bit of research and reflective thought, they decided that they wanted to look into the case of the bronze dragon that's out in the outside the harbor of Waterdeep. There's this large breakwater to stop tidal waves and the like from hitting the actual docks as much as possible. So this dragon is outside of it, which is outside of the dragon ward, the mystical shield that protects and prevents any dragon from coming into Waterdeep. They've had issues. So the group goes to the harbor master. Seems to be a nice enough fellow. They go to a boat called the Longfellow, which is got a wide deck, big enough that a dragon could get onto it if they wanted to. And they determined they were going to schmooze him. They had very good food, fish-based, because that's primary diet for bronze dragons. But they also had the idea to give him a gift to, show that they're serious and friendly. So they had the rosewood box that magically protected the set of dice and the deck of legends that they had found. The Ola Damara's dice and the deck of legends. So, with that plan in mind, first mate Bunny and the silent half-orc captain took them on the Longfellow out into the water, and they had already agreed that they were going to have one of the Sky Knights on a griffin fly over the sound and look for the dragon. They spotted it as soon as they went out. It was a difficulty 20 perception check, which would have been getting less by 1 per hour they spent out. Eventually they would have gotten it. But they found it right away because lots of people to roll dice, and several of them are really good at perception. So they found this dragon. It was actually curled around the spit of rock jutting out of the water. It was sunning itself in the cool spring morning. So they went over and they chatted with it. The dragon was friendly. It had meant no harm to anyone, and told them as much. Told them that anytime it had tried communicating with someone, they left. They didn't want to talk. And why is it here? It's interested in some of the shipwrecks in the harbor, including some of the shipwrecks from early on in the history that's been preserved in the cold water. So it had a legitimate reason to be there and no reason to be concerned by the presence of this dragon. So they had accomplished their job. They also made friends with the dragon. Said, can we come back and talk to you some more? And he's like, sure, you can come back and talk to me. I'll be here for a while. So they left. It was a very satisfactory resolution to their quest. They determined then they were going to try to get rid of another ward for their consideration for the location of the Nimble Right. So they checked through the Sea Ward, going up and down with the Nimble Right locator. Didn't find it in the Sea Ward. They did have a few moments where they, saw a few interesting things throughout the city, but it's the nature of the city. There's always something interesting to see, whether it's a young girl who's selling braids of flowers that really only should be blooming in the fall, and these aren't preserved, they're fresh flowers. That's odd. A number of little things. I always love to dangle hooks and things for the players to take an interest in if they want to. But when it came down to it, the group was pretty content with going around, completing their mission, and after that, and this took a chunk of time to completely comb through, they also decided that they were going to Go home for a bit, talk about some things, which they did. They talked to Khalees. They talked to the folks around their home. But they also wanted to go to the Guild of Innkeepers, the Fellowship of Innkeepers, because they wanted to start to do the things that needed to be done to get the tavern going. So they found out that the Guild of Innkeepers has been waiting for them for a while. It's been no secret that they were planning on opening it up to a tavern. They'd put in a lot of work, and the guilds talked to each other. So they already had the legal papers drafted up. They already had contracts just poised and ready for them to just say, yeah, we want you to send us brew from the distillers and brewers. We want you to start sending us food from the bakers and the farmers in the local area and the butchers. So, the town has basically been waiting for them to take that step. And, it's always been at their pace, which sometimes is them talking themselves out of making progress. As a matter of fact, they even had a fixer. The party was starting to express interest or concern about how much time are we going to have to spend in this? We want to be adventurers. We want to do stuff. And this very helpful dwarf came up to them and said, hey, I can take care of all of your problems. I can basically get the whole thing set up. And we even have somebody who used to manage a bar for 25 years before his bar burned down. But he's ready to start again if you want him to manage yours. He doesn't have the stress of owning the place, and he's very capable. Everything basically was falling into their lap at this point. It cost them a little money, absolutely. They walked out 600 gold lighter. But no, they're basically an autopilot for the bar. The bar will run itself at this point. They're going to have to negotiate with their manager, but the fees for the staff are already taken care of. The food, the eating utensils, the drinkware, everything will be delivered to the bar before tomorrow night. So they could open practically as quickly as they want. So that took a little bit of time. They decided after that was done, they were only footsore. They might as well keep walking around. And maybe it was time to check out the field ward. And hey, they might get into a fight. Last time they were in a field ward, they got into a fight. Last time they were out in the fields, they fought the scarecrows. In the field ward, they got to fight the Zhentarim, as well as some agitators. So they went to the field ward. And they were going around. They noticed that there were a lot more guards than there had been before. The guards had pretty much locked the field ward down. They didn't exactly put everybody into a state where they had curfews, but it was pretty clear you weren't going to just have a raucous bit of shenanigans without being possibly hauled away to jail for a night. So, the locals were behaving themselves for the most part. The evil stewed and skulked. Never gone, but this wasn't the right opportunity. Speaking of opportunity, as they were going along, a shape came out of the darkness and told them, your lives are in danger. Someone is plotting to kill you. And shadowy figure themselves, cloaked, armed, broad hood, mask over the face. Immediately the group's hackles were up because this is unusual and this is not the way that you usually come out and talk to folks. But they have a new weapon. It turns out that Samuel has detect thoughts now. So he cast the spell and he scanned the surface thoughts of the newcomer, which the newcomer had an organized and disciplined mind, but he did put out that, well, I wonder if they'll pay attention to this very important fact about their lives. And I hope they don't attack me because I'm a Zhentarim. Ooh, that's not good. Immediately, Samuel looks over at Jezur and says, grab him. He is a Zhent. The whole group sprung into action. Immediately, people got ready for whatever was coming. And, for example, Luxor quickly zipped around him to flank him. Jazor grabbed him, and he didn't resist. He didn't fight back. Jazor held him up in an armbar, which the only thing he did was kind of move a little subtly to try to take some of the pressure off to be more comfortable, but not trying to resist the armbar or the grab. And they're like, now what do you have to tell us? He was like, what I have to tell you is that somebody has paid assassins to have you killed. There's somebody out there who hates you and wants you dead. And they're like, yeah, you. And this strange person said, no, I don't want you dead. As a matter of fact, I'm warning you so you don't become dead. If I wanted you to be dead, I wouldn't warn you about assassins, and the assassins would have an easier time killing you. So no. I might even help the assassins if I wanted you dead, but I don't. Simply put, not all of the Zhentarim want you dead. And they're like, what do you mean? There's more than one Zhentarim? And he's like, well, there's a splinter faction. There's a lieutenant who's very ambitious, and he kind of wants the whole pie. So they're like, oh, crap, this isn't good. And they rob him. They empty out his pockets. They take his ring, everything like that. And take his weapons. He had some daggers. He had a short sword. Nothing magical. Not very much money. And they're like, okay. What do you want? Who is trying to kill us, first of all? And he's like, well, I could tell you that. But I was going to tell you if we were able to come to terms without you attacking me or anything like that. So if you let me go, I'll tell you who intends to kill you. And they're like, okay. They very begrudgingly, because Jazor would love to have taken him into the authorities and had him hung, or they checked. He had the brand of the Zhentarim on his forearm. He was clearly a Zhentarim. He confessed that he was. But they're like, okay, tell us who's planning on killing us. He was like, well, it's a cult. They follow Asmodeus, Lord of the Nine. Asmodeus is the Lord of Devils. He is the Lord of Contracts. He is an archdevil, and basically he is the mastermind behind the war of the devils against the demons and anybody else. And he gets more powerful by constantly promising power to mortals who foolishly worship him, gain powers, but they sacrifice their soul and often are driven to even more evil acts which serve the cause. So now they know there's a cult of Asmodeus somewhere around. Not all the groups were really all that surprised, honestly. There was at least one person who was pretty happy to hear that they would get to go up against the cult. And they're like, okay, so who's in it? He says, I only got into this town recently. I don't know who the players are. I do know, however, that we have an agent who gives us prophecies and warnings. And when asked about your future, they told us that a cult of Asmodeus was plotting your death. And they are currently... The bill has already been paid. The assassins are on their way. So, be ready, I suppose? The group's like, okay, well, there's nothing more to gain. And he was allowed to leave. Looking over what they took, wasn't very much. And they found a new cool ring that he had. Luxor put it on. He had a moment. But the moment came and passed pretty quickly because he's a pretty deft skulker. And, he just has a new cool ring with 2 winged snakes entwined. So, the group has more information. I did skip 2 relatively minor things. Number 1, Felix did go off by himself off to the Yawning Portal and talk to Durnan, the owner of the Yawning Portal. He wanted to ask him about his personal contact, Elminster. And that he was told that, well, Elminster was still in town somewhere, because whenever the old mage walks around, people pay attention, because usually great deeds are afoot or somebody's going to get beat up. But he wasn't sure where he was at the moment, which is weird. And if he needed to contact him, Durnan could facilitate that, because he does know of the old mage. At this point, he didn't really make a marker. He was just out for information. He wants to learn if he can have a regular contact with this young bronze dragon that's out in the bay. Maybe he can convince him to help him to enhance his weapon, to use the secret arts of the dragons to make his bow better with his essence of some sort. Felix doesn't understand magic all that well, so it makes sense. He's curious, and he knew this was going to be a possibility. Durnan said that yes, dragons know several magical arts, but by all accounts, this dragon was just a young one. Durnan's really well connected. He is a really good information contact. And he had an idea of who they were going to go and talk to. So, after the group had finished with the dragon, they did stop off at the Blackstaff Tower and got credit with Force Grey for their success. So that was good. They also got a nice little reward from the Harbor Master, who gave them a cash bonus. And they got a variety of emergency water-breathing potions from the Harbor Master for a very good rate. So they got some nice things out of that. And even earlier than that, as they were leaving the Mangled Manticore, the bar that they had such spectacular combat with the session before, the true owner of it actually made himself visible. Strangely enough, he appears to be a tiefling who keeps himself completely shrouded, mask and everything. They were able to tell that he was a tiefling, though, who apparently had cut off his horns or had very small horns to wear the hat that he was wearing. And he thanked them personally for helping him out without revealing his identity, but he gave them a big bag of money. It was 750 gold that he gave them, plus it has 3 tokens that will allow them to sidestep taxes for a season. So, for some places, this is a huge boon. So, not too bad at all. Also, the group has been given 3 tokens, which are Lord's Marks. They're simple wood, but they have very ornate marking on them, and they are drawn in almost impossible to forge crystalline ink. But it's basically your get out of whatever crap you find yourself one time. Doesn't free from the consequences, but at least it'll stop the guard or the watch from throwing you in jail for almost anything. Except perhaps open assault on a Lord of Waterdeep. That even a little mark isn't going to help you there. But these are very strong boons the party has gotten, so good on them. They're doing well. So, after the group has dealt with the Zhentarim agent, they finish off with the field ward. It's fairly narrow. This didn't take them a great deal of time. It was dark, though, by the time they come back. And they look as they're coming back, and there is Khalees's Steel Defender, the 8-foot-tall orangutan. Its fists were covered in gore and bits of bone and tissue. Okay. They also looked at as they were going by, its back is all scarred and scratched up. The damage it dealt looked like it came from the front, but it looks like somebody really rattled after its back. They go inside and they see that Max has got his arm in a sling and it's all bandaged up. Khalees himself has his armor rent and he's got some wounds that look like they've been healed, and he is putting together his homunculus, which has been smashed. There's also a couple of members of Pip's brigade that are off to one side. And I'm really skipping on details, aren't I? We'll get to this in a second. But while they were at the Brotherhood or the Fellowship of Innkeepers, they did want to take care of Threwn. So they complained, and they were told he is not one of the Fellowship of the Innkeepers, which is scandalous enough. He enjoys no protection from the guild. But more to the point, he claims that he's not an innkeeper because he doesn't let rooms. He is a tavern owner, and therefore he's not subject to them, which doesn't make them very happy. To the point where they actually got them in touch with their high-powered dark elf lawyer. This barrister, Darketh. Darketh was very, very happy to be working with them. And, yeah, very smooth, very good with law, and basically told them if they should happen to slip up a little bit and take some matters into their own hands, there's at least four very powerful guilds that are very upset with Mr. Threwn at the moment and would use their influence to make sure that nothing very bad would ever happen to the group if something should happen. The party has also been warned that Threwn has been seen in the company of a gang of disreputable-looking halflings, so something could be up there. They may have some plans. We're not sure yet. So, the party comes home, finds out that their friends had been attacked, and they're like, what's going on? And Khalees is like, we were attacked. There were several people. They attacked. My steel defender pounced into their midst, flattened several of them. Another wave of them came and almost disabled him. We all jumped in to help. Turns out that Max isn't quite the powerful sorcerer he claimed to be. There were no fireballs. There was a protest from Max, but Max still insists he can throw fireballs around. But Kalia said, when we dropped our opponents, they fell to the ground and turned into bits of smoke. They were too substantial to be illusionary, pointing to the blood on them from their adversaries. But we didn't see any of their features. They were all wearing red leather masks, and they were cloaked and hooded, and either threw knives or came at us with swords. So there was something odd about this whole thing. They decided to go out and investigate. By this time it was getting later in the evening, and they went out to investigate around the grounds to see if they could find any clue of the assailants. Then a cutscene. There was a circle of 8 people in dark cloaks in a dark room lit only by candles, not a terrible distance away from where the group was at this time. And they intoned, "The sacrifice has been made, the price has been paid. Let the servant go forth." And then, all of a sudden, back to the group, and there's this huge flock of crows flying around, and then they all just kind of dive into the end of the path leading out into the street, and they slam into the ground with a large crack, and smoke issues up, and this fellow shows up. For those of you who are not versed in D&D lore, this is a Garistro. A Garistro is a very powerful demon. Very powerful. Way more powerful than 3rd level characters should be taking on. This was nothing short than a concentrated effort to wipe out the whole party at once. Had they hidden in the house? It's a siege demon. It could flatten their house quite easily. So they had to fight it. It was a pitched battle, and what a battle it was. The group had a couple of things going for them. Number one, action economy. They had more of them, so they could do more things. For every one round that the Garistro had, they all had 6 rounds to occupy. But that was about their only advantage. The Garistro had a lot of advantages on them. First of all, it had probably about twice as many hit points as the whole party had pooled together. It had a very high armor class. It did high levels of damage with its attack, and if it stopped and just attacked, it could get 3 attacks in, doing high levels of damage if it hit, which it had a decent chance of hitting almost everybody. Which, yikes. On top of that, magic resistance. So magical spells were sliding off, and for some reason, spells that targeted it, that would leave a persistent effect, like hexes or banishments or things like that, just slid off of it. Very difficult to make them work on this particular creature. Part of that had to do with these large silver manacles that it was wearing on its wrists. They're connected to chains that seemed to float off to nowhere, like they ended in a different dimension altogether. But they were absolutely wounding this creature. Every round it was taking damage from these manacles. But at the same time, it couldn't teleport away. It couldn't leave. Very strange. One of them realized, and I believe it was... it was one of the wizards. They're both really smart. They realize two things. Number one, it's a very powerful demon, way more powerful than they should be messing with. Because it really did have a good potential of outright killing people. The second thing was that it's a demon. Asmodeus is a devil, and most of his followers are devils. Devils are generally lawful and serve lawful people. Demons are creatures of chaos and pure destruction. So this is very odd. Demons usually don't work for devils. They're mortal enemies, so very strange. But the battle was joined, and the couple of things were going for the players. Number one was that Zarya is a totem warrior, and she follows wolf. So as the wolf tribe has taught her, she fights as a pack. If she's attacking an enemy, all other people in melee against that creature get advantage on their attacks. This proved useful when the thing had a high armor class for 5th edition D&D. 19 is pretty good. So they were starting to hit more regularly, except that a large number of the group were firing ranged attacks, which were having problems. Again, high armor class. What are you going to do? The second thing is the thing had magic resistance. So even if it was something that seemed like it should have been a no-brainer, a paladin using a sacred sword to smite should have done extreme damage to this thing. But all of the magical damage, including the smite and including the sacred sword ability, all halved because this thing was resistant. It also had advantage on any saving throw against any spell thrown at it, so that was most everything that Aldrich and Samul were able to do. So yeah, this was a beast of a fight. Zarya was raging, so she was taking half damage from its attacks, which were just punching and kicking. It really can only use its horns for charging because they're so small. So it was bam, kick. The kicking was significant because it did more damage and it had a chance to knock somebody prone, but just the massive amount of damage, and my dice were working pretty well that night. Just one kick sent Jazor flying unconscious. This was after Jazor had scored a couple of telling shots, but the thing was that tough. It could basically snicker off a few shots from Jazor and his excellent weapon. Zarya was trying to hit it and hurt it. She was using a magical axe, which was good. And she was doing acid damage to it, which it was not resistant to, which the party was cheered for, because Samuel does have a spell that does acid damage. He couldn't hit it with it, but he tried. So she was doing some reliable damage against it. There's no question about it. Where everybody else was really having a struggle. She was having some difficulties hitting it, though, because of the high armor class. So it goes. But Luxor came in, tries to put his hex on the thing. Slides right off because those bracers were blocking it. So he's trying to do hexblade stuff and curse it and blast it and curse it and blast it. He's doing a little nickel and dime damage. Nothing great, but it helps the overall effect. Again, Aldrich and Samul are trying to throw spells on it, but they're not being very effective. The thing is very resistant to magic. So, when Felix is going for his sharpshooter ability, which allows him to take a -5 to hit and do an extra 10 points of damage, which is a nice trade-off, except this thing has a high armor class. He kind of needed all of that bonus to hit, so it was an all-or-nothing thing, and he wasn't hitting it all that often, but when he did, it was hurting. It was having a great effect. Honestly, this is the kind of fight a Gloomstalker Ranger is ideal for. One singular opponent that other people can keep tied up in melee so you can keep shooting it in the face until it stops being funny. And it's always funny, let's be honest. So, the group was beating this huge sack of hit points and taking some grievous damage. Jazor got knocked unconscious. The party shifted around to try to help him. The monster ignored Zarya and her axe to go and crush, and I mean crush, Samul and Luxor, who were bedeviling it. Bedeviling, devils, demon, never. And it just took them both out in a single round. Things were looking kind of bleak. Khalees came out at this point, decided not to keep working on his homunculus anymore because there was a battle going on out there. And he looked up and saw what they were fighting, and he's like, I'm going to help them get back up on their feet because I still got just a little bit left of my healing ability. So he immediately started trying to help people. Well, the thing was, every round, these bracers were doing 66 damage to the creature. It was actually eating into its flesh while it was summoned on this realm. So I let it go around the table. They survived 4 rounds of fighting this thing. Eventually, the damage got to be too much, and the final barrage of arrows from Felix, it finally fell. And as demons frequently do, it got dragged back down into the pit, but the huge silver shackles are still remaining. Crackling with arcane energy? Yes. Covered in baneful runes? Absolutely. What are they going to do with them? They look like they're genuine infernal silver. That's a question for another time. It was a great battle. They all knew they had been into a fight. That's for sure. Yeah, for the most part, it was good. It was really good. The party knows that they can weather tough fights if they work together. But they have to be attended. Not a single one of them can take on a threat that big on their own. So it kind of put them in the right place at the same time. So that's my story. That is my State of the Dungeon address. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Going forward, they're definitely going to want to find out more about those people summoning demons that powerful after them. Although they did get the benefit of another side panel establishing shot where 3 of the people who summoned that demon died when the demon fell without completing its task. So that's interesting. That's something you do too easily or too lightly. But the stakes are never been so high. So that's where they're at. So thank you for joining me. Until next time, I am Rob, and I will see you at my next State of the Dungeon address or for any of my videos. Until that time, though, friends, farewell.